If I was starting out with houseplants all over again, I'd use this video as the guide on what to do and how to do it. Seriously, it has everything you need to know to not only keep them alive, but help them thrive. I mean, what's better than nurturing a beautiful little green baby all the way from wee baba to a glorious, majestic beast? Nothing, my plant friend. I love it. And don't worry, it's really not too taxing. Even an idiot like me can keep a few alive. You just need to get a few basics right and you'll be well on your way. I'm going to buy a new plant from the store in this video and show you exactly what I do to set them up for success. So, it does all start in the shop. Much of the pain, guilt and anguish we experience as plant parents all stem from the mistakes we often make when buying the plant in the first place. First, you'll want to avoid anything that has the word Calafea on the tag. Only joking, of course. Sort of. If you're an absolute beginner, then you'll want to start with something that is pretty easy going, like a monstera, a peace lily or a snake plant. And Calafea is not easy going, my plant friend. Trust me, I know from experience. Crispy brown leaves and Calafea go together like peas and carrots. It's something even the most experienced growers struggle with, as well as me. The best advice I can offer here is to hunt out a couple of plants that tickle your fancy and then do a quick Google search to see how fussy they are. I usually just type in the name of the plant and easy care and see what comes up. If the results come back with things like, this plant needs specific care, then alarm bells should be ringing in your head. If you like a challenge, then go for it by all means. But if you want an easy life like me, then move on to the next one. I think I've chosen my plant. I'm going to choose this mosaic plant, £7.50, which I think is a Photonia. I've already got one of these in my house. I think I've got one of these already in my house and it seems to do quite well. So I know this one should do the same. I had a quick look on Google to see how easy it is to care for. It's pretty easy to care for. They say they like high humidity, which I'm not sure whether I agree with or not, because mine seems to do okay, not particularly high humidity. But the health of the plant is pretty good. All the leaves look in good condition, no yellowing, no browning. Doesn't look like the plant's on death's door or anything like that. So it looks like a good healthy plant to buy. It's in budget, it's easy going, so I think this is the one I'm going to purchase. Now that I've found a green buddy that doesn't sound like it's going to give me too much grief, and it's in my rather limited budget, I now need to do the most important step. Check for pests. So before you go and pay for your plant, you want to give it a quick check over some pests. You probably won't be able to be 100% sure that the plant hasn't got pests, but you give it a good look over and get to see any obvious damage. So you want to look for kind of speckly leaves, particularly underneath. This is where the potential insects like thrips and spider mites have been munching away on the leaves. So if it's looking a bit speckled underneath, then you want to avoid that plant and move on to the next one. It doesn't look like this has got that. Looking at the underside of the leaves, they all look pretty healthy, as you'd expect to see. You also want to look for webbing on the underside of the leaves where it meets the petiole particularly. Very fine webbing, that's an indication of spider mites, where they kind of spread over the plant and use their webbing to munch on the leaves. Something like that's happening on this plant. And also any specks of black or red or anything like that, or the indication of thrips and spider mites, which doesn't like is the case on these leaves. I'll give it a check over. You can also look in the soil as well for any fungus gnats. Now there probably will be fungus gnats in most plant pots because they are the bane of everyone's lives. But if you give it a little disturb on the front, on the top, and if you see anything popping about, little flea-like insects, then they are fungus gnats. So you can have a quick look at the soil of your plant. I've had a look at this one. It doesn't look like there's too much activity going on. So I think my checks are over and I'll take it to the cashier and pay for it. I'm pretty happy with my purchase then. Doesn't seem like it's going to be too much of a nightmare. The foliage looks pretty decent. I can't see anything too sinister under the leaves and in the soil, and I'm getting reasonably good value for money. I'm excited. So, you'll be pretty excited about your new purchase and you'll want to bring him home and plonk him straight onto the windowsill to meet all his new friends, right? Well, this can actually land you into all sorts of bother, so hold your horses. It's well worth doing yet another check for pests. I know it sounds OTT, but you can never be too careful when it comes to pests. The last thing you want is for the little suckers to jump ship and invade your existing collection. Disaster. And it's very tricky doing a thorough check when in the store with all those eyes on you. You get some funny looks, believe me, and you can easily miss the little gits. You know, most of them are pretty small after all. I bought this plant back from the shop. I've been having a look at it for the last 5 to 10 minutes to see if there's any naughty pests on here, and I can't see anything. So I've had a good look at the underside of the leaves, especially where the petiole meets the leaf or the stem meets the leaf, because that is where they tend to hang out, especially spider mites. And it's a good idea to get a light. You can use the light off your phone and you can shine it on the other side of what you're looking at, and it kind of shows up the very fine wispy webbing. So that's a good little tactic to use, and you can also use it to look at all the underside of the leaves. So if you do have a problem, you want to isolate the plant and you want to treat it with an insecticide or something to get rid of the bug, depending on which one you have. So I'm now pretty happy that there are no pests on this guy. I can put him in his new home, right? Well, I would actually wait. This step is optional, but I highly recommend it. I always isolate new plants for at least a week. I know I sound like a madman, but I hate pests and I want to make sure there is no risk of them spreading. Who knows what eggs and whatnot might be on the plant and have yet to hatch and spread and conquer. We don't want a plantocalypse on our hands with bugs jumping easily from ship to ship, do we? Like I said, it's optional, but I keep them in the corner of a room like a naughty child for a week or two, checking them over every day to see if anything rears its ugly head. Now that I'm reasonably happy there are no hidden suckers lurking under the leaves or in the soil, we can now get him ready for his new life in his new home and for a glorious friendship to blossom. I now look under the bonnet and check out the health of the engine. Roots, that is. Plants that come fresh from the store should be in decent soil and have healthy roots, but sadly the world isn't a perfect place, so it's well worth checking them out. Pull its trousers down and have a look or even fondle of his private parts. He won't mind. No need to go mad and disturb all the soil and break apart the root ball. He's fairly delicate down there after all. You're just seeing if there is room for roots to grow, that they look healthy and plump. We have a very healthy plant here because lots of soil for the roots to grow into. It's not root bound whatsoever. You can see all the finer roots have reached to the bottom of the plant, which is quite good, away from the crown. And the roots are nice and beige, which is exactly what you want. You don't want any black roots in here because that's an indication of root rot, and you'd want to get rid of that going forwards. But yeah, really healthy plant by the looks of things underneath in the soil. Loads of room for these roots to continue growing for probably at least another year. You might think you need to get the plant out of the soil he came in and pop it into a nice fresh mix, but honestly I wouldn't bother. Unless the soil absolutely pongs and is a bit of a dog's dinner, I'd leave it alone. He will happily live in the soil he came in until he outgrows the pot and is ready for an upsize. Basically it's a problem for much further down the road. Right, if you've isolated your plant and it's been a week, or even if you didn't bother, you need to check how dry the soil is. Is he ready for a drink? Now don't overcomplicate watering, it boils down to this. Water the plant when the soil is dry. That's it, nothing too taxing. Forget schedules and all that, just check if the soil is dry and give him a drink if he is. You can use your finger for this and go about halfway down into the soil. If it feels wet, then leave it another week. And if it feels dry, then he needs a drink. But I use my trusty moisture meter for this because I find it much more reliable. I've actually downplayed that a lot. This device is the plant parent's best friend. And it's my favourite thing in the whole wide world because it takes the guessing game out completely. The one I use is listed in my Amazon store, linked in the description if you're interested. And when it does come to watering, just know that as long as the pot he lives in has holes in the bottom, you can't give him too much. Waterboard him for over an hour if you want to, and he'll be just fine. Overwatering is about frequency rather than volume. That's a big takeaway from this video. And I'll leave a link to a video about that in the top right corner if you want to go further down the rabbit hole. So he's well watered, what about food? Plants need food, right? Yes, they absolutely do, my plant friend, but not yet. I'd avoid giving any fertiliser for at least the first month. Sounds harsh to starve him like this, but the reason is pretty simple. You have no idea when the grower last fertilised him. It could have been the day you bought him, so to feed him again would soon fatten him up, and that's not good. Yellow leaves and drooping are the issues you might face, or even plant death. Not pretty. Be safe and wait at least a month. Even if it has been a while since he was last fed, he isn't going to starve, he'll be just fine. Before I go about finding a spot for him, which has some crucial steps I'll cover in a jiffy by the way, I always add one of these to the pot. What on earth are these ugly things, I hear you cry? These are fungus gnat catchers. These are the stickiest things you'll ever touch, and sometimes annoyingly so. They always stick to my hand whenever I brush past them, but needs must. They're yellow because gnats are dumb enough to be attracted to yellow and will fly into it, the daft things. And they can't get off, so they will die a slow death. Sounds pretty grim actually. Oh well. Fungus gnats are the most persistent pest, and having one of these in the pot does two things. It keeps a lid on the population by catching the adults, but it also tells you how bad a problem you have. And this is crucial. If you've caught thousands on the card, then you've got a big problem that needs sorting. Leave it and you'll soon be overtaken and you'll want to give up on life, let alone plants. And check out the video in the top right corner all about how I finally conquered these mighty beasts. We're about ready to finally pop him in his new home and let him settle into his new surroundings. But where should he go? For this, you need to understand what light he wants. This is crucial. All plants have different light needs. Some need direct sun, like succulents and cacti, but most indoor tropical plants will require bright indirect light. Don't worry too much about what that means. It's just a catch term for not allowing direct sun rays to touch the leaves. The plant basically wants to be in the shade from the sun, otherwise the leaves will burn. I.e., don't leave him to roast on a south-facing window all day if you're in the northern hemisphere. A quick Google search will tell you what the ideal light for your plant is, so it's well worth doing this. So the tag of this guy that came with the plant says that it needs a bright spot out of direct sunlight. So I don't always trust these tags because quite often they don't even give you the name of the plant. But this one does, mosaic plant, Fittonia. So I have done a little bit of research on it online. It tends to back that up. So it does need a bright spot, which I think is about 800 foot candles minimum. More on that in a little bit. So it doesn't want the direct sunlight to touch the leaves because it will turn them crispy brown. Not a massive issue, but if you keep doing it, if you keep it on there on a south-facing window in the northern hemisphere, for example, then you will get lots of crispy brown leaves and you'll end up with nothing. So I need to find a spot that is nice and bright where direct sun doesn't touch the leaves, which is a little bit tricky. So now it's all about finding the right spot in your home. But how on earth do you know if your home gets low, medium or bright light? Well, for this I have this trusty light meter. Don't be too alarmed, it's pretty cheap and there are even apps on your phone you can use that do the same thing, although a little less accurately. I bought this fella a year ago and I love it. So this guy, my light meter, has saved my bacon because I now know exactly how much light is coming into my home. And it turns out not a lot because I measure the light coming into my house in various spots and it's always quite low. So this measures in lux and foot candles. I use foot candles. I think they're more or less the same measurement really. Anything below 500 foot candles is considered low light, so that's not great for your plants. And anything 500 to 1000 is medium light, which is good for your plants. Above 1000 is high light, which is probably quite unlikely in most spots in your home unless you're right next to a window, which is this spot here. So I'm going to put this plant on this window shelf right here next to this window. This is an east facing window, and during a bright day or clear day during spring and summer, I know that it gets about 1000 foot candles, which is great. So all these plants love that. But on an overcast day like today, it is getting about 300 foot candles, which is lower light, so not great. But that's pretty much the best I can do in this house, unless I was to put it under a grow light. So this spot It will get direct sun, but it should be able to tolerate it because I live in Sheffield in the north of the UK and we don't get much direct sun. If you're struggling to find the perfect spot for your new guide, then don't worry too much. If it's not got bright enough light most of the time, it just means it won't grow as vigorously as it could. It will still most likely be perfectly happy in your home. And if you really want to get the best out of your plant, then consider adding a grow light. I've got 4 Sansi grow lights in my home, which allows me to have plants in dark spots in my house, and you can use my code for a 15% discount in the description to this video. Every week you should be checking the soil with your finger or your probe if I've managed to convince you to get one, and only watering when the soil is dry. This is the biggest takeaway from this video. Most problems come about because new plant parents are far too generous with the watering can and drown their new baby. Wait for the soil to dry out and everything else becomes much easier. Enjoy your new green friends, you've earned it. There are tons more tips and tricks to learn to get the best out of your leafy pals, so check out the video on the screen now for more fun. And subscribe.